The courtroom smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, the kind brewed hours ago and left to burn on a hot plate. Ceiling fans clicked rhythmically above rows of wooden benches. It was one of those late mornings in New Orleans where the heat pressed through the courthouse windows, thick enough to turn impatience into sweat. At the front of the room sat Judge Eleanor Blackwell, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s whose reputation for clean judgments and cold mercy preceded her. Her black robe hung perfectly pressed, not a wrinkle out of place. And before her, at the defendant's table, sat Grace Holloway, a tall, fair-skinned woman in a tailored navy suit, posture flawless, expression confident. She looked like she'd walked out of a corporate boardroom and straight into a courtroom drama. At the prosecution table, Damian Brooks sat, restless and tense. A black man in his late 30s, his jaw tight, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit. His tie was a bit loose, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But his presence filled the room in a way that expensive fabric never could. He'd been summoned as the defense counsel. The irony wasn't lost on him. Grace Holloway, a prominent executive accused of corporate fraud, had insisted on representing herself until the court assigned Damian as her standby counsel. She had laughed, not politely, not nervously, but the kind of laugh that told everyone she didn't take him seriously. "You're joking," she had said when she first saw him that morning. Damian remembered her exact tone. Crisp, superior, dismissive. "I don't need representation from someone who clearly doesn't fit this level of litigation." The words hung in the air, unspoken but obvious. "Someone like you." The room had gone silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. Judge Blackwell had raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Holloway, this man is a certified defense attorney with the state. You will address him respectfully." Grace had smiled thinly. "I meant no disrespect, Your Honor. I just prefer to handle things myself. I have years of experience in negotiation and—" Damian cut her off. His voice was calm, low, the kind that carried power even when quiet. "Experience in negotiation isn't experience in truth, Ms. Holloway. Let's hope you know the difference." The courtroom had chuckled. She had not. That was the beginning, the moment Grace Holloway decided she despised Damian Brooks. She didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost her everything. Grace's company, Holloway Innovations, had been a rising star in renewable energy until a whistleblower leaked documents suggesting she'd falsified safety reports to secure state funding. The media pounced. Investors fled. And now, she was on trial for fraud and negligence, resulting in 2 worker injuries at a Louisiana site. Grace was brilliant, no one could deny that. She had the education, the charisma, the perfect public image. But arrogance had its own gravity. She thought she could outtalk the law. Damian, assigned to monitor the case as a public defender, saw something that others didn't. She wasn't guilty, not of fraud at least. Someone had set her up. But Grace was too proud to let him help her. When he offered to review her evidence, she scoffed. "I built that company from nothing," she said. "You think I need your advice on how to save it?" He sighed. "You might not need advice, but you do need perspective." She crossed her arms. "And what's yours?" "That people like you think justice bends around privilege, until it doesn't." Her eyes hardened. "I see. So this is about race to you." "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "This is about truth. But I've lived long enough to know who the system listens to, and who it doesn't." Their exchanges became legendary in the courthouse. Sharp, tense, electric. Every witness session felt like a chess game. Damian spoke only when necessary. Grace interrupted often. She was eloquent, confident, and almost always wrong. I was crumbling, and she didn't even know the full scope of what was being done to her. 3 weeks into the trial, a new witness was announced. Patrick Voss, her former CFO. A white man in his 40s with an immaculate beard and the kind of grin that reeked of deceit masked as charm. When he entered the courtroom, Grace went pale. He was the one person she trusted with every detail of her company's finances. "Mr. Voss," Judge Blackwell began, "you understand you are under oath?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Proceed," said the prosecutor. Voss began his testimony, voice smooth and confident. He claimed Grace had ordered him to manipulate quarterly reports to hide operational losses, falsify injury records, and inflate environmental certifications. Each word was a dagger, and Grace could feel the courtroom's energy turning. She interrupted once. The judge silenced her. She tried again. The judge warned her. By the time he was done, Grace looked like a woman unraveling. Then Damien stood. He'd been silent for most of the testimony, taking notes. "Mr. Voss," he said, walking forward. "You said Ms. Holloway personally emailed you instructions to alter financial statements. Do you have those emails?" "Yes, sir," said Voss. "I submitted copies to the prosecution." "Copies," Damien repeated. "Not originals?" Voss hesitated. "They were retrieved from backup." Damien nodded. "From whose backup?" "The company's servers." "Which you managed, correct?" A flicker crossed Voss's face. "Yes." "And you had administrative access to alter data logs?" "Yes." "But—" No further questions. The courtroom murmured. Grace looked at him for the first time that day, really looked at him, and something shifted. For the first time since this trial began, she saw not a man who'd been assigned to her, but an ally. That night, Damien stayed late at his desk. He rechecked timestamps, examined metadata, combed through digital archives Grace had reluctantly provided after hours of arguing. At 2:17 a.m., he found it. A string of hidden transactions Voss had rerouted to an offshore account weeks before the whistleblower leak. It wasn't Grace. It was him. He leaned back, staring at the screen, realizing just how deep this setup ran. The next morning, Grace arrived early, her demeanor subdued. "I heard you were here all night," she said softly. He didn't look up. Didn't have much of a choice. "Why?" she asked. "You don't even like me." He turned to her. "You think liking you has anything to do with justice?" Her eyes glistened for the first time. "Maybe I was wrong about you." He smirked. "Get used to it. Tomorrow we turn this thing upside down." The courtroom was packed. Cameras everywhere. Reporters lined the hall. Judge Blackwell sat with her usual cool detachment. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "you requested an evidentiary hearing?" "Yes, Your Honor. New material evidence." The prosecutor objected. Overruled. Damien began. He projected the company's email archive onto the large screen. "Your Honor, the prosecution's entire case rests on these supposed emails," he said. "But these were not sent by Ms. Holloway. They were created by Mr. Voss." The prosecutor scoffed. "That's speculation. Not if the metadata says otherwise." He clicked. A digital trail appeared, timestamps, IP addresses, server hashes. Then he pointed. These emails were composed after Ms. Holloway's account was suspended and sent from a terminal registered to Patrick Voss's office. Gasps filled the room. Grace's hands trembled under the table. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but Damien's calm authority drowned out the noise. He presented transaction logs, showing that Voss had diverted funds into a Cayman account under a shell company. "Mr. Voss," Damien said slowly, "do you deny having access to these accounts?" Voss began to sweat. "This is a fabrication." "Then explain this," Damien said, revealing a notarized letter signed 2 years earlier. granting Voss sole control over certain financial authorizations. The courtroom went dead silent. Grace looked up at Judge Blackwell, her composure breaking. Damien's voice echoed softly. "Your Honor, this man framed my client to save himself. She trusted him, and he used that trust to destroy her." For the first time in weeks, the judge's expression softened. She looked at Grace, then at Damien, then back at Voss. "Mr. Voss," she said coldly, "you are under investigation for perjury and corporate embezzlement. Bailiff, take him into custody." The room erupted. Grace gasped, not in victory, but disbelief. It was over. Damien exhaled. Exhaustion etched into every movement. But as the reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed, something even deeper happened. Grace Holloway, the proud, untouchable executive, walked over to the man she once belittled and said, barely above a whisper, "Thank you for believing in justice when I didn't." 3 months later, Grace stood at a podium overlooking the Mississippi River. The sun dipped gold behind the skyline of New Orleans, and the air buzzed with new beginnings. The charges had been dropped. Voss was indicted on 11 counts of fraud, and Holloway Innovations, now renamed Phoenix Energy Group, was back under new leadership. She had hired Damien Brooks as her company's chief legal officer. As reporters gathered, she began her speech. "I once thought intelligence and success were enough to protect me," she said. "But I learned that truth needs defenders, people who fight not for applause, but for what's right. And sometimes those defenders come from the places we least expect." Her voice broke slightly. She turned toward Damien, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. "I was wrong about you," she said, smiling faintly. "But I'll never forget who stood up for me when no one else would." He nodded, saying nothing. Later, when the crowd dispersed and cameras dimmed, he walked up beside her. "Seems like you got your life back," he said. She smiled. "No, I built a new one." He looked out at the river, reflective. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that case?" She laughed softly. "I'd probably be serving time, and you'd still think I'm the villain." He grinned. "You weren't the villain. Just lost in your own storm." She extended her hand. "Partners." He shook it. "Partners." As they stood there, the city lights flickered on, jazz music drifting faintly through the humid air. Injustice had tried to bury the truth, but in the end, the truth had roots too deep to die. Months later, the story of Grace Holloway's trial became a viral documentary, watched by millions across the country. But the most shared clip wasn't the courtroom victory or the press conference. It was the final scene, an interviewer asking Grace what she'd learned from it all. She smiled and said simply,